Welcome back to the Straight Talking Law podcast. Today, we're turning to something that affects millions of people but is often misunderstood. What happens legally when a relationship ends? Because for many people, this comes as a shock. They may have been living together for years, sharing finances, property, and even children, only to discover that legally their position may be very different depending on whether they were married or not. There's a common misconception around so-called common law marriage, and the reality is often quite different. The government has recently published a major consultation looking at reforming this whole area, including divorce law, financial settlements, and the rights of cohabiting couples. So today, I'm going to put myself in the position of someone going through a relationship breakdown and ask the kinds of questions they might have. And to guide us through that, I'm joined by Michael Horn, who is the Managing Director, and Caitlin Abel, a solicitor and team leader of the Family Department. Okay, so if my relationship was coming to an end, what's the key legal difference between being married and simply living together?
So for married couples, there's a lot of powers available to the court. There's various factors that they have to consider, such as income needs of parties, standard of living, the welfare of the children, things like that. And as I said, there's a lot of powers available, but they're just not the same for cohabiting couples. And I think a lot of cohabiting couples are left unprotected with the current law.
That's right. And more people are unmarried and living together now, and it just leaves a massive void, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That people that are in a relationship sharing assets don't really get those protections of being married that a married person would get.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people assume that the same protections are in place because they might have been in a relationship for 20, 30 years, but unfortunately I think a lot of people obviously think that their relationship won't end.
Yeah.
And if it does, then they're left vulnerable and in a position where they might be left with nothing.
That's wrong. Amy, you've got to remember that there's a difference between family law and civil law, and especially equity. So if you have been making payments into a property where you live, even if you're not married, you can still create rights in that property, and that might be under Talata, which is the Trusts of Land and Trustees Act, and that generates a different area of law that could give you some reliance. But basically, if you live together as a couple as though you're married, you don't get any rights that a married person will get. Of course, things may change very soon, Caitlin, mightn't they?
Yeah, so I think the current consultation, they're talking about bringing a lot more protections in for cohabiting couples and changing the law to make it more similar to that for married couples upon a relationship breakdown.
Yeah, which will be good. That will be welcomed across the board, won't it?
Definitely, yes.
There's a lot. It leaves children exposed as well, doesn't it? Because if mum and dad, for example, and they've got children and they're not married, then and the house is in the name of dad, then that can create some problems.
Yeah, and whereas in divorce law under the Matrimonial Causes Act, the court will consider the welfare of the children, but that just isn't a consideration really for cohabiting couples.
No. So, Amy, an awful lot to go through there, but I hope that gives you an indication of what the position is right now and how it just might be changing in the near future.
Thank you both. So why is the government now looking to reform this area? What's not working with the current system?
I think the current law is quite outdated and there's a massive rise in cohabiting couples. I think there's over 3.5 million cohabiting couples in the UK. And I think with the lack of protections available to them, it's just the law's not really keeping up with modern families and modern relationships.
Yeah, well, I'd agree with that, Amy. Caitlin's absolutely right. But Caitlin, is it complex? Is getting divorced and separated financially if you're married, it always appears complex, and it's very frightening because people are emotionally involved at that stage.
Yeah.
So in fact, is it complicated?
It can be complicated in certain cases with big assets, and even in more modest asset cases it can become very complex and it can be quite protracted. But there's a lot of framework and guidance available for married couples, and there's factors for the court to follow. Whereas I think it's a lot more ambiguous with cohabiting couples, and it's not as clear what the options are available to people.
No. And that brings in the civil side, which we were discussing earlier on, whereas if you have been making payments to assets and you're not married, then that can give you a right to claim a share, a stakeholding in those assets. We did a video a little while ago where we're talking about even when you are married, if you set aside assets or transfer them into your partner's name, but those are for tax benefits and it can be proven that that's the case, then that can assist the court in deciding where assets should be based. So who actually still owns those assets. But the basis of the rule is that if you're in a marriage and you are separating financially, then you disclose everything through Form E's. And then the court can then see exactly who owns what and where the fair split will be. So I think that answers that. There is a whole raft of difference between being married and not. And the law is going to address that, we're certain, in the near future.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are essentially unprotected under the current system.
As we've discussed, a lot of cohabiting couples are left unprotected and vulnerable, even women with children and men, and a lot of people in general are left unprotected. So I think the change in the law will be quite well received.
Yeah. I think people get on with life, don't they? And they get on, and you meet somebody and then you cohabit and you start your family and perhaps run your business or get your savings, and people just get on with life. And then later on, when things aren't quite working out, Amy, it's a little bit of a shock to people that they don't have those rights. And I think when we speak with people, Caitlin, if they could go back to the beginning, they would do something different.
Yeah.
Because even if they're going to get a fair share of what's going on, in actual fact, that isn't by right or by law. That's because it works out that way, and you need the protections, and the law is going to change with that.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about divorce. If I'm married and separating, how does the law currently deal with finances?
So the court favour people to exchange full financial disclosure with the other party, and that gives the court a starting point to see what would be a fair split for people. There is various factors that we've already mentioned that the court consider, which are in Section 25 of the Matrimonial Causes Act, and they include things like the income needs, the welfare of the children, and there's various orders that the court can put in place to make sure that people's needs are met and they're protected financially in future.
And the courts, even though people criticise courts, Amy, and we've all heard that happening in the past, actually judges see an awful lot of these cases, and even though sometimes it feels a little unfair at that stage, it usually works out to be fair because courts, judges have got the foresight and the experience, and they do seek to set out what might be fair for all the parties and have in their mind really the welfare of the children.
Yeah, and if the court don't think an agreement's fair, they won't approve it, and they'll ensure the parties are reconsidering their options and making sure that they're reaching an agreement that's fair for them both and that won't leave them kind of cut short in the future.
And the importance, I think, Caitlin, is about being open and honest about what your assets are.
Definitely.
Right in the beginning, in the Form E's.
Yeah, and I think we have it quite a lot when people want to miss off certain assets from the forms because they think it was acquired pre-marriage or that it shouldn't be open for consideration, but everything needs to be disclosed, and even if there is an argument that that shouldn't be considered, it still needs to be disclosed.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's not disclosed, then there's a chance, isn't there, that the financial separation between the parties can be revisited later.
Yeah.
So it's important to be honest. In everything to do with law, it's important to be honest. But it's important really to seek advice from a solicitor when you're thinking about that disclosure. And don't engage in an agreement where you just simply say, okay, well, we're going to get divorced. That's online now. No fault divorce. Easy as you like. Let's just separate our assets between us. Sign this bit of an agreement which we run off the internet, and then later you're going to face difficulties. So full and frank disclosure, do it properly, go and speak with a solicitor, and of course they can speak to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. What changes are now being proposed to the way divorce finances are handled?
So we've spoken quite a lot about the current framework for divorce law and finances and the proposed changes. And I think one of the major changes that the consultation is hoping to bring in is legally binding pre- and post-nuptial agreements, because currently they're only persuasive for the court. And I think a lot of people enter into prenuptial agreements without proper legal advice and think that if they divorce, then that agreement will be followed. But the ordinary framework in the Matrimonial Causes Act will override in certain circumstances. And if the court don't think the agreement reflected in the prenuptial or postnuptial agreement is fair, then they just won't follow it.
They're just persuasive, aren't they?
Yeah.
At the moment, they're just persuasive. And of course, when you are entering into your relationship and time passes, businesses build, children, other things happen. So what might be a good, solid agreement between two people at the beginning of a relationship or before a marriage, then that might not be the case as you move down through the relationship. So things change, don't they?
Yeah, circumstances change. And it's always advisable for people to update pre- and post-nuptial agreements anyway. But I think it would be a lot better if they could be legally binding, just to offer people that additional protection.
Even though the law hasn't changed as yet, or the directions to the court haven't changed as yet, there's a golden theme that really runs through everything that you do with your legal documents, and that's honesty. And so if you are not disclosing at the outset the true level of your assets, then you can't expect a court to support you in any pre or post nuptial, post obviously being an agreement that you enter into after you are married. And so if you're not being honest, then don't expect the court to support you. The actual key to this is going to be full and frank disclosure to your partner about what you've got and what they're giving up their rights to. And honesty in a relationship should be the key foundation of everything.
Yeah, definitely.
There you go.
So the aim is to make outcomes clearer and reduce disputes?
Yeah, so the aim of the changes in the law is just to make the outcomes hopefully a lot more predictable and provide people with the protection, and so that they'll know where they are following a separation, rather than it being left open-ended and not clear what will be the outcome.
I don't think it's going to reduce disputes, though.
No, definitely.
Because anybody that's got a contract is going to be able to go to court and have it tested. And there's going to be allegations of not full and frank disclosure when the agreements were entered into, Amy. And if you want to rely on those documents, honesty is the best policy. But I don't think it's going to reduce litigation. I think it's going to change litigation. And so there's going to be a wealth of case law that are going to be going on with that. Again, you need to get a solicitor, somebody you can trust, and somebody that you can sit down and have a conversation and have a full and frank conversation, and then set your legal lives out. Do it properly.
Let's move to cohabiting couples, because this is where many people are. If I've been living with my partner for years and we separate, what happens under the current law?
Amy, that's a question that we get asked all too often, and all too often we get asked it late, very late in the day. If you are cohabiting and you haven't paid anything towards the mortgage, or you haven't paid anything towards the business that you run with your partner, or you haven't created some financial clear picture between you, then you won't get anything. And a lot of people find themselves in a very difficult position. We've talked about this earlier on, Caitlin and I, in this video. So the answer has to be, if you want to protect yourself, and at the moment under the current law, if you want to protect yourself, then you've got to enter into agreements with your partner. You've got to agree who owns the house. Doesn't matter if the mortgage might be in your partner's name. It's about what you're doing and have an agreement. I'm paying X amount towards the mortgage and therefore expect X amount to come back in equity from the house when it's sold, maybe that you're having children together. And so you want to be discussing that. What happens if we separate? What are you going to be giving to me from these assets we've built together? Again, with businesses, we know that the person out there running the business, on the spanners, if you like, or in the building site or somewhere else in the office, then that person thinks that they might be doing all of the work and the business is in their name. But behind the scenes, you've got somebody that's taking care of the children, doing the washing, ironing, doing the shopping, doing the helping, that enables you to run your business. Without an agreement, you have no rights to dig into that side of the financial arrangements. So overall, actually, what you need to be doing, again, is speaking with a solicitor, Amy. And anybody that you're speaking to, Amy, tell them the same. Go and speak with a solicitor if you're not married, and then just set out what your assets are, what the business is, how it's running, and what percentages you both agree should be yours in the event of a separation.
Okay, so what changes are being proposed for people in that situation?
Well, no, there are proposals, Amy, and the proposal at the moment is that it's going to run parallel to almost being married, but there are going to be changes. There's going to be periods of time before you become eligible. That's saying 3 years at the moment, but that could well change. And then there's going to be a focus really on fairness again. And throughout these videos, we talk about fairness, we talk about honesty, and the courts are going to want to see fairness between the parties. So it's going to be about who did what was promised, what was disclosed, and there is going to be a parallel, but it's not going to be the same, at least not straight away, as that of being married. We've spoken earlier on, Amy, about the court applications, and is this going to be easier? And the answer is no. It's going to generate a lot of court action, and court action is going to have judgments, and those judgments are going to be either binding on other courts or persuasive. So we're going to see this area of law developing over a period of time through case law. But again, the absolute emphasis of any agreements is honesty. Set out honestly what is going on, what your assets are, and honestly what you're doing, and make sure that you have contracts. Even though you trust each other and everything's great, ultimately everything comes down to what you've agreed and whether or not you can prove it. Amy, I hope that assists.
Right, so it wouldn't mirror marriage, but it would offer some protection?
That's right, and the protections are going to get more and more and more as that case law is developing. It is going to follow the idea of marriage, or at least a separation and financial separation of a marriage. So there is going to be an awful lot that is similar, but you can't say, well, one is the same as the other. It's going to be a real quick moving feast. As Caitlin said earlier on, there's an awful lot of cohabiting couples out there, and a lot of them are involved in businesses, small businesses, children, and there's a lot of reliance on how the house is held, in whose name. So look at this. We're going to be seeing an awful lot of case law developing over this, and we hope that the legislator, when they're putting together these agreements, that they're thinking very carefully about how to help people find the right way in the preamble to the drafting. So it will assist people, including the courts, in discovering what is fair between the parties. So Amy, watch this space. It's going to be a lot of change.
Another situation people often don't think about is what happens if a partner dies. If I'm not married, where do I currently stand?
So there's no automatic inheritance rights for cohabitants. It may well be the case that your cohabiting partner's left you something via their will, but the rules of intestacy, which will be covered in a different video, they exclude cohabitants as a rule.
Yeah, they do. And so that could bring other people into the assets that your partner leaves, and it may be unwanted. So getting a will is absolutely essential, and guard yourselves, protect yourself. So yeah, Amy, everything that Caitlin just said is absolutely right.
What's being proposed to change that?
Well, there's a lot actually, and you can see that the government is moving. The government always moves behind the way that society moves. So society leads and the law follows, unless the legislator is trying to stop things happening, and the legislator is reactive mainly, and they can see, can't they, that there are these issues of unfairness. So there's going to have to be more direction, more qualification in who will get what under the new proposed rights that are going to come out for cohabitees. There's going to have to be more indication of who can interfere in the estate of somebody who's passed without a will. But as Caitlin said earlier on, do a will. Go and speak to a solicitor. Be very careful to tell them everything, and make sure that that solicitor understands from both of you how the future of those assets should pervade through the estate as and when one of you passes away without being married. There's a lot of changes coming, as we've said throughout this video, and you need to be extremely careful. And of course, speaking about it with a solicitor will assist you understand not only what you need to do now, but what you will get later. And it may even cause you to change how you hold property, for example, or even add in your spouse or your partner into a business asset. So speak with your solicitor, be absolutely transparent with them, and get your documents drafted properly.
It sounds like there are some clear themes running through all of this. What would you say are the key principles behind these proposed reforms?
There definitely are some clear themes running through the proposed changes, and I think the main ones are openness and honesty, and just providing protection to vulnerable people and ensuring that people are covered in the event of a relationship breakdown, even if they're not married.
I think that's right. And the same theme runs throughout in open and honesty. You should be open and honest with your partner, with your courts, with the separation between the parties. It's being open and honest really is the way forwards. But moving forwards, you're going to have greater reliance on the pre-nuptials and the post-nuptials. And the courts are really going to be looking at creating fairness, which is going to be outside of the normal protections which you get when you're married. I don't think that these changes in the law are going to be affecting those that want to get married, Caitlin.
No,
You?
No, I don't think so. I think marriage is an important thing to a lot of people, and I think the changes in the law are just bringing the law up to date with the people who don't choose to get married, but also ensuring that people who do want to get married have the same protection that they've always had.
And a little bit more, because the prenups and the postnups will be there. So it's bringing everything into line, I think, and it should work extremely well.
Yeah, I think it's just bringing the law up to date with modern society, really, and how people are living their lives today rather than when the law was created.
And then allowing case law to catch up with the balance of what the legislation might say, so that everybody, the lawyers, will know to be able to advise their clients on what they can expect going forward. So just in a summary of that, really, there's going to be changes in the law which are really going to have the gaps filled in by case law.
So it's about modernising the law without removing the importance of marriage.
That's absolutely right. And as I've said before, Amy, that the law follows society unless it needs to be stopped doing something. And so society has moved that way. And now all of us are asking the legislators to say, look, we need some guidance on this. And they're going to give it to us. And it's going to mean that those of us that want to get married can do so. But we will also have the benefits of prenup and postnups. So yeah, very exciting times, and probably overdue, but the courts are going to be busy in dealing with that.
Finally, if someone is listening to this and thinking this might apply to them, what should they be doing now?
I think, as we've said, the main thing people need to do is just seek independent legal advice, and they need to make sure that they find a lawyer that they trust and that they can speak to and explain their whole situation, and then that lawyer can advise them accordingly. And I think it's really important that people know what their rights are and know what they need to be putting in place early, so that in the event of a relationship breakdown, they're protected.
I think the answer is, Amy, overall from my perspective, if you are in a relationship, this is going to change what is going to happen in your future at some time. Speak to a lawyer.
The key takeaway from today's episode is that the law around relationships is changing, but currently it doesn't always reflect modern life. Whether you're married or living together, your legal and financial position can look very different when a relationship ends. This consultation is about creating a system that is clearer, fairer, and better equipped to protect people, particularly those who are most vulnerable. If you find yourself in that position, getting legal advice early can make a significant difference. If you need advice, you can contact our team by phone or through the web form on our website. Thanks for listening to Straight Talking Law.